Hi, welcome to this session of the Data Stack Summit focused on the path to data and analytics modernization. So today we have Vikas here from T-Mobile, and I'll let you, Vikas, let you do a little bit of an introduction about yourself, and then I'll do the same. And the format today, right, I'll be asking Vikas a set of questions on the topic, and we'll have an informal conversation about this topic. So Vikas, and take it from here.
And, Hello, everyone. I am excited to be talking today at the Data Stack Summit. My name is Vikas Ranjan. I'm a senior engineering leader at T-Mobile, and I've been working on the data for all of the last 17 years of my career. Again, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to having this interesting and interactive and learning conversation with Jeff today.
All right, great. Yeah, so just a quick introduction about myself. I've also been in the data space for a number of years. About 2007 timeframe, I ran a startup in the analytics space for a number of years, and have been involved in robotics and big data here at NVIDIA as well, where I work on autonomous vehicles and the tooling infrastructure of which a large part is the data infrastructure. Right. So, all right. So maybe we can get started with the first question, Ranjan. So Ranjan, how do you manage the growing volume of data, or how have you managed the growing volume of data over the last several years, while making sure to look into the future and looking at kind of the modernization of this as well?
Jeff, as we all are living in the world of digital world right now, I think we have all seen data grown exponentially over the last many years. As a data leader, as a data professional, this has been both interesting as well as challenging to us, right? From our experience, management of data is always related to your business. What are the key business drivers? How are you gonna get a value from data? I think what are the problems you are trying to solve? What is the, why do we need this data, right? Start with the whys first, right? And then looking at, the behavior of the data, looking at making sure this data is really solving the problem. For me, I always look at big data is not about the big volume of data. Big data is all about big value of data, right? So over the years, as the data has grown and evolved, important aspect we have learned to manage data better is about our organization, about our culture, about how do we use this data to solve our business problems.
Got it. And do you, from your perspective, also have you seen an evolution in the types of data as well? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, right? In my experience, I've seen us go from sort of tabular data, right, to very rich data. Like in my current job, there's a lot of rich media data as well that we're also including and doing analytics on. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, being working in the telecommunication industry for so long, we have definitely seen a humongous amount of change in the nature of data we have been working on, right? Coming from a traditional telcos, dealing with the call detail records is what we traditionally telcos have done in past. Over the last few years, with the growth industry has made in the 5G, we're talking a lot more about sensor data. We are talking a lot more about how can we build smart facilities? How can we do, smart engineering, right? How can we improve our experience, right? And on the other side of it, we're also seeing how can we use this data to become good for the society. Recently we have been looking at some of the data sets as the industry evolving is improving our planet, right? And then, how can we bring in this power of data, the power of innovation into making life easy for people? So absolutely a great transformation, a great way of how data used to come to us in terms of velocity, the use cases, the type of data coming from a network log to now to a sensor log, all the way to, a tabular data, all the way from relational data to a very complex nested data. It has been a great journey with a lot of transformation on how data has come to us and how it continues to evolve.
Yeah. So that's great. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the same things on my side as well. I am curious, what do you see as this kind of growth in data and the types of data, right, has occurred over the last few years? What are you seeing as some of the major problems of dealing with this data?
How do you make the data useful? I think that's the key, right? When the big data evolution started over the last 7 years, right? People started building these big platforms, leadership started going and investing money into, hey, let's load all the data. Started building data lakes, data lake. Now we are talking about data lake house, right? We did a lot of investments on bringing data into one place, and there was a very little effort on, getting the value from the data. I think the biggest challenge we have seen is it's not about loading all the data. It's about what is relevant, what is useful, what is valuable to the business. That is one of the big challenge we have seen. And obviously, when your data grew from a terabyte to a petabytes or hundreds of petabytes, managing the data, managing the platforms, right? Making sure you have the people with the right skills. I think those are some of the challenges we have seen again from a people process technology. Do we have the right technologies? And there are too many technologies now. What is relevant for us? Do we have the right skills? And then most important, do we have the right use cases to solve these business problems?
Yeah, that's great. So actually, that's a perfect segue into the next question. So you mentioned extracting the value of the data, and a lot of that has to do with who are the internal customers, right? Who's actually using the data, and what are they going to be using it for? So first question on this topic is, how do you actually organize the data to make it much more accessible to the internal customers, right? I think this is definitely a topic that many of us have struggled with, right? So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that. And and maybe as a part two, as you answer this question, is the goal to make this self-service so that many people within the organization can be empowered to actually use the data to drive value, or are you planning on doing something where you're more baking the data right before giving it to the customers?
Yeah, excellent question. I think I'm pretty sure all data professionals, data leaders are trying to solve this problem many different ways. In my experience, I don't think there is one size shoe would fit all size, right? It all comes down to your personas. It all comes down to your internal user community. You are using data scientists want to use the data for different purposes, right? Then you have your traditional data analyst who just want to do traditional trending and reporting, right? And then you have your business leaders who are just looking at this data for a financial analysis. I think based on the personas, some of the experience I've seen in the industry and what we have been doing is, there's no one solution. You look at the type of the personas, in some cases they need to have access to the raw data. They need to have access to the granular data as possible. We provide them sandboxes. In other cases, when you are looking at executive level reporting, you're looking at a network analyst or a data analyst, the visual exploration is the best tool to do. And this is where we have tons of tools like Tableaus of the world, Power BIs of the words. And then in many other cases, right, when you have your complex data engineers, this is where you use a lot of this massive hyperscale tools like Databricks of the words. So they're, in a way, this is all self-service based on the persona. Every user is using the persona and they're using those right mix of technologies to get the value from the data. That's what we have seen.
Yeah, and internally, from what you've seen, like what's the right way to set up an organization? Is it like a service organization, or do you see yourself as like a product organization, right? Where it's more like data as a service, right?
It's an excellent question. I think there is a multiple different school of thoughts. We have been hearing about from a data lake to the data lake house, and the fabric. And in the recent few months, there's a lot of talk about data mesh, right? And there are a lot of mature organizations who are basically building data as a product. In the older days, we used to consider data team and a data warehouse team. Hey, load data, prepare a report, and then we're done. However, we are seeing a lot more focus on building data as a product, own data assets. With some of this data mesh, you don't have to build a single data lake. It's about expertise on the data and make data readily available with the right information about the data, the content about the data.
Okay.
Something we are aspiring to go more into, and we have taken some steps, but I think there's a lot of learning and opportunities in this space.
Yeah, and do you see, as part of the services you provide as an organization, being able to do more advanced and sort of sophisticated things around managing data sets, right? So as you start getting into, beyond sort of analytics applications into AI and ML, the management of data sets, right, was also considered data, but it's a slightly different form of data. And that's also, something I see is becoming very important in these organizations.
Yeah, excellent question. I think one of the things we have done a lot more work in the last couple of years is truly building data as a service, right? All data professionals, we need to make APIs our best friends, right? APIs are not going to solve all the problem, but APIs are going to solve a lot of our problems. It's an 80-20 rule, right? With the APIs, I mean, this is where, a traditional business team, downstream teams, right? machine-to-machine integration is important, right? So that's one of the steps we have taken in addition to just adding the sandboxes and other things. So the more we build APIs, the more we integrate machines together, systems together, I think the more successful we have in terms of sharing the data, as well as integrity of the data, and also making sure the data is used for the right purpose.
Okay, great. All right, so maybe we'll switch gears a little bit into really how do you design the system and the platform, right? So as we've talked about, right, starting several years ago, right, to today even, there's been pretty massive shifts, right, in the types of data we're collecting, the ways data are being used. And so how do you account for having enough flexibility into the system, right, where you can future-proof against new use cases that start coming up?
Yeah. I think a lot of organizations now are doing more agile, more scrum. One of the important thing, or one of the learning we have over the years, is like when we are going from a traditional waterfall into more of an agile methodology, we are spending some design spikes only on the design spikes. It's very important to spend time on your hypothesis. It's very important to do your testing of your design, right? Your options, right? Your explorations, right? Not just putting on the paper like we used to do architecture role in past, and then you start building, and then it doesn't scale anymore. Take your time, have a spike break, have the design spikes, validate your assumptions, do your hypotheses, see what works, what doesn't work, and then build on the top of it. So I think the foundation is very important. And oftentimes when we are moving very fast, sometimes we miss the part of building the right foundation. So that's something we have put a lot of conscious effort over the last few years on start doing more design spikes based methodology to build flexibility in our design.
Yeah, you sound like a product manager.
Well, data is a product now, right? I think we
exactly. Yeah,
that's the key.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's great. All right. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk really around costs, budgeting, right? And again, this is something that from my experience, several years ago, starting with very small tabular data sets, though our data sets weren't that small, but fairly small compared to today, to very large, potentially even dense data sets like we talked about, right? Sensor data of all sorts, different sorts. You start to see massive growth in the needs for storage and infrastructure, right, to manage all this. And so, how do you think about this from a budget management standpoint, right? Because, again, and I'll throw this in here, right? If there's that aspect, and then there's what is the value of the data, and if you just put all the data you can in there, you're going to have a very large IT bill, and the finance department probably won't be very happy, right? So, number one, like, how do you think about managing and forecasting growth? And then, in terms of data retention policies or cost optimizations, what are your thoughts around handling that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing when you're talking about anything to do with the cost is about, number one is the planning, having the alignment within the business and the technology teams on the common goals. I think that to me it's a key success criteria for managing any cost, right? Obviously, we as a leaders, always want to deliver 100 things with like 10 cents, right? Easier said than done, right? There are a lot of moving pieces into that. The key thing is like have an alignment at the leadership level. You need to have some sort of executive reviews. You need to have some sort of governance board, right? Engineers always want to solve. They have a lot of ideas, and innovation come from engineers, but not everything is a must for the organization, right? Having the leadership level alignment to understand the goals, and are we aligning our projects and our vision to those goals, to me is number one, right? So comes to the drivers, and then talks about technology, right? As I spoke about earlier, it's important to have design spikes. It's important to build foundation strong, right? And there is going to be some cost on the foundation. I think there is going to be some wastage on the foundation, right? As we are learning, we are spending money. Important thing is like fail fast, learn fast. I think that's the key. The more we invest our time and focus into sort of what you called as a product management mindset,
yep,
the better we manage the cost there. And especially with the cloud, the cost is unpredictable. So build predictable the cost, provide the visibility and the transparency on your spend, right? Look at the opportunities where you are wasting money, right? Cut down the waste zone. I think those are the key drivers: alignment to the leadership team, having the right design in place, and having the right assessment and audit of your systems, and making sure you have transparency and visibility and the stakeholder alignment.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to go off script a tiny little bit and sort of tie this back to an earlier comment you made, right? Where I was asking about the important problems, right? And I think one of them you said is like, how do you extract value of the data, right? And so when you look at budgeting as an example, I think it's important, right, probably to attach the value you're deriving from the data to the budgeting. And so maybe walk me through if that's something you currently do today and what that looks like.
One of the things I've been learning is, talking to the industry leaders from the other spaces and also from my journey here is you need to bring cost as a part of your design. I think that's the key. And you need to, bring cost visibility the more and more into your executive leadership view. I'll give an example, right? Very generic example we all deal with, right? A lot of time people will come back and say, hey, I want to present this report to the C-level or to the VP or SVP, senior executive side, to my director, right? And there is an engineering team working on putting a lot of effort, preparing data, doing all kind of data engineering stuff. And that report is like a 2 weeks of life shell. Mm-hmm. It's really important to, have 5 engineers working on building this report. Or maybe this is a simple report you put in an Excel and show the value to the leadership thing, right? It's about thinking smart on how you want to, use your team effort. You want to use something which is short-lived versus long-lived, and kind of tie it back to your business value again is the key, right? As we talked earlier. Yeah. So the other part of this, again, is very important, is having telemetry on your data platforms and your systems. The more at looking at your patterns of the data, talking about your retention quotient, oftentimes people will load the data and there is no so-called retention policy enforced, and the data is sitting there for years.
Yep.
One good day you have seen that you have 5 petabyte of data and you need to go and ask for X million dollars more. So having that audit of your system usage, having the access patterns, I think those are very, very important and critical things which are missing a lot of places. And a lot of companies are now investing money into observability of platform and data.
So it's analytics for your analytics. Yeah. All right. Okay, great. So let's see. The last question I have for you here is, tell me about the complexity you have in your platform, right? And, tell me where you've seen success with this.
Yeah, excellent question. I think as we talked about this earlier with all the companies and organizations we are part of, many years back, we used to consider a terabyte of a data as a big data. And now many of us are talking about petabyte of data as not a big data. Yep. So one of the big challenge we have with the big data, with the volumes and the velocity and the veracity, oftentimes it's a backlog of data, right? Oftentimes we deal with the quality of data, right? We have even seen with some of the hyperscalers, volume is a challenge. They are really good in storage, right? But processing, you're always bottleneck. You're always spending a lot more money because every industry has a different use case, different patterns, right? So some of those things we have challenged was, how do we make sure your availability of data is always on time and your quality of data is always pristine. The trust of data is important because you can load data completely all the times, but the data is 70% wrong all the times. Then you're going to make some really bad decisions for your business, right? So those are some of the challenges we have seen. It's about how do you have these tools which are truly highly massively scalable? How do you have pristine quality of data? I think those are some of the things I've seen where there has been a lot of opportunity space for a lot of companies. They've struggled and find out solutions. The biggest thing for me, success is team empowerment. Your leadership should be empowering your team, to do experimentation, right? I call this as a failure without fear. Mm-hmm. If you enable your team, if you tell your team, hey, go try and don't worry about failure, you're going to find the right solution. So enabling your team, empowering your team, the leadership has propensity to accept failures. I think it's where we have seen a lot of success, right? The last piece also, as we talked about this, is how do you make this data useful and valuable? Mm-hmm. And this is, again, a continuous exercise that you need to have a feedback loop with your users. You need to make sure that, they are using the data the right way. They're also telling you what is missing in the data, and that the feedback loop is on both sides. It's not just a technology team has to just blindly say yes to everything. The constant relationship, the communication, and the dialogue is what we have seen in past as a complexity. And I think there are organizations putting a lot more emphasis and focus on that now.
Okay. All right. I think that wraps up the questions I had. Was there anything you wanted to add, Vikas, before we wrap up this conversation?
I really enjoyed this conversation today with you. Thank you so much. I think for me, if I have to summarize this, the key thing when you are talking about your data platforms and your data journey and modernization, it always comes down to people, process, and technology. Do you have the right people? And are you empowering them with the right things? Are you looking at the right technologies? Are you prototyping the right things? And end of the day, do you have the right governance processes? I think if we as an organization spend more focus with this product-driven mindset now, we are in a very good state in this future of data.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. Thanks, Vikas. I myself obviously learned a lot from this conversation. I hope the audience has as well. I think at this point in time, we're going to open it up to Q&A for a period of time. And yeah, so people should feel free to ask questions in the chat.
Thank you. And thank you for having us here today. It has been a pleasure joining this session with you, Jeff.
Right. Great. Likewise, Vikas.